Hi, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Today, I have with me Nythia Thedani from Rain. She is the CEO of Rain, and they focus on voice technology. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today, Nythia. Welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast.
Thank you so much. It's very nice to be here.
Why don't you just start by just telling us about Rain technology? What kind of AI voice stuff do you guys do?
I'd love to. So Rain is a voice and conversational AI company. If you think of Google or Google Assistant or Alexa, we build custom versions of these assistants in industries like automotive and healthcare. Very early on, we saw an opportunity to build voice AI for the deskless workforce. So these are skilled workers that quite literally don't work in front of a desk like you and I. They work in industries like I mentioned, healthcare, automotive, transportation, and they make up 80% of the global workforce, but they have really been kind of underserved by software and technology. So just to put this into context, if you think about if you've ever, tried to make a call from a ski lift with your gloves on. That's more or less the technology experience that exists for these workers. They're juggling devices, they're reading small text on phones, sometimes they're wearing specialized gear, so it's just not easy. What we're building is voice assistant productivity tools that are really purpose-built to make these workers smarter, more efficient, safer in what they're doing through assistive AI. And our lead product is called Ortho, and it's in the automotive space. So this is an auto repair assistant that can help technicians get information on the job. So there are just so many points where a technician might need to look something up during their job. If you think of a vehicle and all of the different makes and models of each car, these techs rely on multiple data sources that come from OEMs to inform this work. But that means that they're coming out from under the car, walking over to a computer to get this information, getting the information, sometimes writing it on their hand and then going back to, input. And with our AI, they can just get these answers, instantly and stay in their workflow. So we're really accounting for the unique needs of these workers in building voice that they actually want to interact with.
Oh my goodness. So number one, I didn't realize that deskless workers accounted for 80% of the workforce.
We
Wow.
do.
And number two, I cannot even imagine the difference in productivity. Have you been able to hear from any of your customers about the kind of difference it's made in that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've heard pretty staggering numbers in terms of productivity. Increases of up to 30%. With our Ortho AI, we are saving technicians hours per worker per week. Again, I kind of painted that example of the fact that you're walking to a computer, looking up this data. Imagine how efficient you would be if not only you had the information at your fingertips, but also you're staying in your workflow, right? You're not getting distracted. You might walk over the computer, also pick up your mobile phone at the same time, check an email. So it just creates greater productivity in general. And this is really one of the, core themes that we're seeing for any business that, companies that can use this AI technology to save money should use it, right? And they will use it because it can really streamline processes and improve efficiency. The opportunities are really unlimited. And I'll go back to the deskless worker that we focus on. And it's not just in the automotive field. If you think of construction or healthcare, we've kind of witnessed firsthand some of these inefficiencies that can so easily be solved through AI. So if you think about workers who are doing math conversions on, an iPhone. So, a construction worker who's trying to do a complex conversion is sometimes pulling out their iPhone and opening up the calculator and doing that conversion there. You see somebody taking measurements and you have two people taking measurements because one is taking the measurements and the other person is writing them down. We've witnessed in a hospital setting, nurses who have been scrubbed in and who are kind of writing blood pressure readings down on a napkin. And you really start to see, wow, if there were a way with just voice that you could retrieve data and input data kind of in the moment, in the flow. There's just so much potential for efficiency for workers here.
Yeah. How do you, or how does voice account for, just checking your work, making sure that you didn't enter it incorrectly?
So there are a couple of ways to do this. One is kind of just a playback. So if you were to say something or record something with a voice assistant, they could easily play that back to you to make sure you're hearing it correctly. We also think a lot about multimodal experiences, which is using both voice and visual. So sometimes we'll have experiences where you might input something with voice, but then there is a screen or a tablet where you can see it. And
Okay.
that's where you get kind of that visual confirmation. So it's not all voice. Sometimes, hearing a long number
Yeah.
read back to you, your voice is not really that may not be efficient. So we really try to think of the user, what's going to be most beneficial to them, and what's going to give them the greatest productivity.
Hmm. Okay, so you say that synthetic creative like ChatGPT is going to be regulated. I'm very interested in how we're going to regulate technology here in the future, or how we do now or should. So how do you see this process playing out with regulation, and what do leaders of organizations need to know about this?
Yeah, absolutely. And we could just kind of back up for a second here and talk about why that's needed in the first place. So you have ChatGPT, this truly transformational tech where you can ask any complex question about any topic using natural language, and it's going to give you this really thoughtful generated AI answer. And I love to kind of kick the, talk about this quote from an NYU professor that called or referred to Chat GPT as AI's Jurassic Park moment. I really love the movie, so I appreciate this reference, which is basically saying that we've created something so incredible, but also really terrifying and dangerous. And we've
Yeah.
released it to the public, and the electric fence isn't working yet, right? That electric fence is the regulation. It's incredible that this chatbot can give you an answer, an articulate answer to any question, but you have no idea where it's coming from or if it's even true. There's no disclaimer at all. So people should not be asking ChatGPT for medical advice or investment strategies and then taking those at face value. If you think of Google search, we ask a question and then we get links back, blue links, and it's up to us, the user, to decide what information we want to click and use. With ChatGPT, they're taking the work out of that, right? They're making their own assessment and almost coming up with their own perspective on what the right answer is. But a lot of that information is coming from the internet. So, we know that that's not always accurate. So regulation, is coming, and it should. The government has notoriously been slow to legislate technology, as we've seen in the past, with all of these big tech players, because it's complex. But this really has to be a focus in 2023 and 2024, because this is going to move really quickly. And frankly, internally, the AI companies themselves, like OpenAI, which owns ChatGPT, has to roll out some self-imposed limitations. That's probably going to come in the form of more AI. So, that's the irony here, is that the only way to combat AI is with more AI, just given how sophisticated these technologies have become. But being able to really kind of label and distinguish between human generated and AI generated content is going to be really important. And it is in many of these tech companies' best interest to put some effort there, because they need people to trust the integrity of these platforms, right? If they don't, they're going to stop using them. And ChatGPT needs that usage. That's how it learns and trains. So, together, I think that the tech companies and the government have to really work together to solve this.
So one of the things you just said was that they will need to be able to distinguish whether or not this is a human generated or AI generated thing. Like, how in the world will we be able to do that? Like, I mean, you know that there's plenty of kids out there now using ChatGPT to write papers or whatever, like how in the world will teachers know, or I saw something about some, I think maybe MIT student that created if you put your paper into this program, it can tell whether or not ChatGPT put it out or something like, so there might
Yeah.
be some checks in that way. Are there any other ways to find out whether or not this is AI generated?
Yeah, and I mean, it's a great question. I don't think anyone has the answer to this right now. There are countries out there that have taken, like China, for example, has taken a very heavy-handed approach with technology like this. It essentially banned all AI generated content, which I mentioned that because that's been thrown out there too, right? Especially in the education space, professors are calling for this technology to be banned, which is just frankly unrealistic, right? It's just too hard at this point. We don't have that infrastructure in place to even ban it. So the best thing to do is really try to work with it, and if there are ways that can actually be used in fields like in the job force, but also in fields like like education, to improve, right? To actually make these processes better. If you think about, in education, tablets years ago were seen as kind of scary computers, and now they've become an integral part of the learning experience in moderation, and they've also played an integral part of hybrid learning. So I do think there's going to be, kind of that in between, not banning it, not using it, not having it replace everything, but trying to work with it. A really important piece there is going to be, this labeling, which is thinking about how you can, read the text that's being generated and understand that it's generative AI versus human written. And I think a lot of that nuance today, and this is going to just become an ever evolving challenge, but some of that today is just going to come from the natural language itself. So some professors today, and certainly the AI, can detect whether it sounds, whether it sounds like a human had written it or not. And so, I think that's what we ultimately want to get to. This answer wasn't right, so maybe.
No, I think this is the conversation that needs to be had. I mean, like you said, we're so early in on this stuff, but yet it's so far ahead of us that it just seems like just having these conversations are incredibly important. And I think about government trying to be a part of the regulation process. And I just remember some of the questions that Mark Zuckerberg got about Facebook when he went to the I don't remember what meeting it was, but it was, it was with a committee from the Senate or Congress, and just those questions were so off and out of touch that
Yes.
it put me in this concerned position as just a citizen. How will our government be able to keep up and be a part of the regulation process?
I absolutely agree. I saw something recently, and I can't remember what the case was, but the Supreme Court judges were ruling on something that was like very heavy tech focused. And I think one of them made a joke that, we are not, this group of individuals are not exactly the experts on the internet, but they're sitting there and making some really important lasting rulings about how this technology will play in our society. And I agree with you. It's scary to think that, we don't have the knowledge to even know how to regulate it, but that just makes it more and more important that young people get involved in these conversations and don't just go straight to the tech side, and really think about ways that they can play a role on the other side of it as well, and start to, get into some of these roles and jobs where they're going to play a more protective role with AI.
Okay, so I've got some questions for you as a CEO too. I love these questions. I hope you don't mind. First of all, you came in, you were not a founding CEO. You came in a few years ago and made a major shift in the company's trajectory. Can you tell us a little bit about that shift, and how hard was that for you as the new person coming in and making a big change?
Yep, exactly. So I was hired in by the two founders, Nick Godfrey and Brian Edelman. And it was, I think so essentially I came in as a consultant. Just to give you the full context, I was on maternity leave at the time with my oldest, and you know, kind of in just a reconsideration moment, thinking about what I wanted to do next. Didn't have a company like Rain on the radar at all, but was asked to come in and consult and really just think about where this company should go, right? Like Rain was doing a lot of really interesting things in technology, with the web and apps, and the question was, okay, well, what is the next 10 years going to look like? Where should we go from here? For me, this was really, it was almost fun to start as a consultant, because when you go in, everybody is very open, right? They don't think you're going to ultimately be the leader of the organization. So you get all the skeletons in the closet. So I was very eyes wide open to knowing kind of what I was getting into, where the challenges were. As I spoke to team members across the country, it was really interesting to learn mainly about how exciting some of the opportunities were within conversational AI at the time that we had a pulse on, and that we were doing some cool work there. So, just to fast forward, I did the consulting gig. A good part of my recommendation back to Rain was, this is where the company should go, into this space of voice and conversational AI. And, was asked to come in and kind of do that for them, and asked to take the role of CEO, which was exciting. And as I mentioned, kind of an interesting way to come in, but a great one, because I knew fully what I was getting into. I had relationships with a lot of the people that I had spent time with in that 6 months. And so it was kind of, okay, this is what we've decided on. Let's hit the ground running and do this. But it was challenging. I often say that sometimes I think it would have been easier to just, start Rain as a conversational AI company, instead of taking what was an existing company, doing some of that, but a lot of other things as well, and pivoting it entirely into what Rain is today. It wasn't an easy shift, certainly kind of some growing pains along the way, but it's exciting now, a couple of years later, to have a team and a vision that's very focused on conversational AI, on serving this deskless workforce. And yeah, it's been an exciting ride so far.
Mm. So how much did the org chart shift? How much reskilling or changing of positions came about because of this big change? Because you were doing general marketing and lots of different things before, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So there was a pretty significant shift. What we tried to do early on was keep people at the company, but kind of move around their seats. I don't know if you've ever read the book Good to Great, but it's I love that book, and I love the idea that what you really need is to just get good talent in the door who believes in your vision, not just kind of where you're going, but just wants to be on the bus, and kind of move those people around in seats if you can, if you feel like you have really good talent on your hands. I mean, we have, I'd say, probably 50%. I mean, we're a smaller company now as we've narrowed our focus, but 50% of our company is still there from day one when I joined. And we've taken a lot of the skill sets and strengths from those team members, and carried them over into what we're doing today. So that has been exciting, and it's just awesome to see how people have just rallied around a new vision and direction. At the same time, we had a lot of folks who wanted to be doing something else, right? When they were hired at Rain, they hadn't signed up for voice, they hadn't signed up for being a technology or a software company, or serving workers, right? So over the years, we've certainly seen attrition. But I think, as I mentioned today, we're really at a point where the team is right, and everybody is rallied around this common vision of building productivity tools for the deskless workforce, and that's exciting.
Yeah. So, and that took, I mean, you've been at this for 3-ish years?
It's been a little longer than that. So it's been close to 6.
Okay.
And it's, I can talk a little bit about just, the success and what's worked, what hasn't. But
Please do. Yeah.
for us, it's really been about focus and kind of continuous focus. So as I mentioned, when I came in, Rain was doing a lot of really exciting things in technology. Conversational AI was one of them, but not the focus. And, decision one was, okay, let's go after voice and go after this industry. We see that it's going to be transformational, but at the time it was small. There were only a handful of players in the voice assistant space. Alexa had just come out, and it was this new shiny consumer voice assistant. And we started there, but as the world got bigger, we've just gotten more narrow in our focus. The industry exploded, and specialization has been key for us. So from, okay, a lot of things in tech to now we're going to focus on conversational AI and voice. Over the years, that focus has gone deep into deskless workers and really thinking about how we can solve those pain points. That's where we've seen the most value and utility. And then really gone deep within workers into certain verticals. As I mentioned, automotive being one of them, healthcare being another one. We're really thinking about how our assistants can understand and interpret and auto workers specific jargon, right? We don't want them to understand everybody's jargon. We want them to be very specific to the auto industry so that a technician can almost speak to our assistant in the same way that they would speak to another colleague who's at the shop. An example I give here, which really makes that focus and specialization come to life, is in the automotive world, a very common term is wheel nut, a part of the wheel. If you were to ask a generalist AI like Alexa, in a sentence, if you were to say wheel nut, she would not hear it as wheel nut. She would interpret that as will not. And that's because she's trained to speak to the general public and to answer general knowledge. She's not trained to understand the intricacies of, OEM data and the automotive industry. So that's for us where focus has really played an important role, where we have said, okay, if we go into specific verticals, we're going to make sure that our language models and experiences are built for workers in those specific fields, and we're going to be the best at that. So the focus piece has been really important for us. And just, an anecdote going, because we spoke about ChatGPT, I think we're going to see the same trend there. What OpenAI did with ChatGPT is they basically opened this AI up to the public. The generative AI is actually not new. It's existed within big companies for many years, but ChatGPT opened it to the public, and then they released it without a specific use case. So it's almost like they're looking at us and asking us to figure out and tell them what we want to use it for. So it's learning from that. And what's interesting here is as it learns, we're going to see a lot of new companies emerge over the next, 6 to 12 to 18 months that use that kind of generalist knowledge as a base layer, but then go really specific into industries like legal or medical or publishing, building off of ChatGPT. And that's a little bit of kind of the approach Rain's taken with our AI and our product as well.
Nithya, what is your number one challenge as a CEO looking into the rest of 2023?
So for us, the biggest challenge right now is talent. We spoke about that before, which is, how the organization and the org chart has changed. But, we just raised our Series B. We are growing aggressively and we're getting new talent in the door. And we want to make sure that is the right talent, right? And that we're not compromising this as we're scaling and hiring quickly. COVID has created some really interesting dynamics around talent, which, there's opportunity, but there's also challenge with that. There's been, especially in technology, just huge movement in the last couple of years, particularly in the last year, where you have a lot of new talent out there from big tech companies that's kind of looking for different opportunities. So that's really great, but it's also harder to retain talent these days because people have different standards of work-life balance. They have different expectations of work. They want fulfilling work. They demand upward mobility, flexibility, all of these things. And there's just so much innovation out there when it comes to hybrid working models. And so you've got talent that is, a talent. So the bar is really high for kind of the kind of talent you can get, but the bar is also high for employers to retain that talent. And we need to show that we are innovating and paying attention to those things. So that's really kind of the challenge for us this year, is building out the team for the next stage of growth.
Hmm. What about greatest opportunity 2023?
I'll just kind of go back to what we were talking about, which is just leaning into tech, and figuring out how to integrate it into your organization. We're a tech forward AI company, and we're also thinking about what's new out there. How can Chat GPT play a role in what we're doing? But any just company out there who's mid-market in 2023 should be thinking about the opportunity to innovate and really change business through technology. Every area of your organization, from operations to supply chain, by just leaning into tech like ChatGPT. And what we're seeing is that the barriers to accessing this technology are much lower today. So there's a lot more opportunity to experiment and to innovate and to create, models for better sales, better marketing, better customer service. I think it's very daunting, especially for organizations that are outside of technology or digital today. But it's just so important to understand how AI and these technologies will impact business and industry, or someone's going to come in and do that, right? So I think staying ahead of it, not fighting it, is really important for us as an opportunity.
So I see that you went to Wharton School of Business, right?
Yes.
Can I ask if you had Adam Grant at all? Did you ever have the opportunity to have him in class?
So I didn't have him directly as a professor, but I've seen him in many lectures because he's such a quite a celebrity at Wharton.
Yeah, well, I think he's quite a celebrity in this
Everywhere.
industry for sure. And that just leads to the question about what's your favorite business leadership book? I mean, you mentioned Good to Great before.
I love that one. And that's kind of more of a kind of OG business leadership book. One that I love that is not squarely in the business leadership genre, but it's a memoir, is Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, which is essentially the story of Nike. I happen to also be a Nike brand fanatic. I love the brand. So I loved that story even more. But for anyone who's an entrepreneur, it's just kind of all of the things. It just, you feel it when you're reading, and, there's passion and vision and just this unrelenting belief in what he was doing as an entrepreneur. And I think there are just a lot of important lessons in that book. Really coming down to kind of just purpose, like what are you doing and what are you going to do to get there? And, Nike, it's a theme in the book. It's one that Nike has, it's a quote that Nike's kind of taken in some of its taglines, but the idea that, change is the only constant, I think resonates with me very much, especially in how I've described how Rain has evolved over the years, and how we just have to keep evolving, especially in a field like technology. So I love that.
Interesting. I'm going to have to check that one out. I have not read that one. Okay, so you might have already answered this question. If so, that's fine. But building the organizational infrastructure to really sustain growth, or completely change, as we talked about earlier, can be a challenge. What other obstacles have you faced in that process? What has your company done well as you look back on that?
Yeah, I mean, the org structure has changed a lot. The office dynamic has changed a lot as well. Rain has always had remote offices, and that we had headquarters in New York, but we had an office in Utah, one in Seattle prior to COVID. And now post-COVID, we're fully remote, and we're kind of hiring the best talent from everywhere, wherever we can get them. And that's, of course, really positive because it's upped our game across the board. But it also makes things like onboarding, just management and relationships more difficult. I think one thing we've done really well is just having a very strong leadership team in place across our business units. So regardless of what movement is happening on the team, these leaders keep things running smoothly. I love that saying, be like a duck. They are very calm on the surface, but paddling like crazy underneath. And I think that helps as changes happen with the team and with the organization. It's great to have that constant of those leaders in place. And we hold people accountable. And I think that comes with just accountability to us, myself, the founders, as well, when it comes to just transparency about goals, expectations, runway. We don't, we're an organization that doesn't really waste time trying to filter ourselves, especially with our leadership team. They have all the information, they know what's keeping us up at night. And I think that really helps to make sure that everybody's aligned.
You, as the person who came in as the consultant, you made all these, you recommended this shift. The founders saw that and said, oh my goodness, yes, we want to do this. Let's bring her in. She can lead the way. What is your relationship with the founders now? Like how does that relationship work, or that working relationship work for you guys?
It's a great relationship. And I'd argue that the relationship and kind of support from the founders at Rain is why I've been successful, why the company's been successful. There are a lot of different ways that could have played out. And I felt very strongly that I was coming in as a female CEO, younger at the time. And I just had a lot of support and buy-in from them, kind of unrelenting support. And that just kind of took, I think when you go into a new job environment, the biggest worry is, okay, dynamics, do I have to filter myself for this conversation? How do I make sure that that I'm asserting myself here? And you like kind of making that first impression from the get-go. It was easier for me to do that coming in with kind of Nick and Brian supporting, but also throughout the journey, it's kind of just been a lot of collaboration and making decisions together. They play different roles in the company than I do. Nick is focused on is the COO now, and very focused on kind of the company's operations and a lot of the hiring. Brian is leading a lot of our outward BD, our fundraising efforts. So, there's kind of everybody's playing their roles at the organization, and it works really, really well.
That's cool. Kind of going back a little bit to the organizational infrastructure, onboarding, and you'd mentioned this before, that onboarding is tough when in a fully remote environment. What does your onboarding or employee development process actually look like now? And is there any particular practice or routine that really works well for you?
Yeah. So I'd mentioned that now our teams are fully remote. So when we bring new people on, that can be challenging from just an onboarding perspective. One, and just obviously it can be done remotely, and there's documentation and ways that people do this, but it's kind of the softer side of it that I think is more challenging, is like, how do you really allow these team members to come in quickly and feel like they're part of the team and have the right relationships to get their job done well. So beyond the tactical onboarding, one of the things we do is we have a set of leadership principles we call our LPs, and they're really representative of our culture and our principles, and they help to get everyone aligned and on the same page about the company as a whole. Like, what's our DNA? What drives this company? And those are more behavioral. One of my favorite ones is, bias for action, the idea that we are doers, not talkers. If you're in a meeting and you have a comment or criticism of something, that should come with an idea or an action, right? So we're always thinking about how of solving something. And that's been something that is really ingrained in our culture. The leadership principles are also just kind of who we are as individuals. So another one that I love is experts with humility, which is the idea that expertise is a verb. So we are constantly learning in everything that we're doing. We have a point of view. We have strong convictions, but we also want to be open to listening and to learning. And there's the kind of some humility that comes with that. So, that's a kind of a posture or a DNA of the people who work at Rain. And we make sure that everybody understands that when they walk in the door, so that they're kind of feeling that as well. And interestingly, we try to make sure, obviously this may change as we get much bigger, but it's usually myself or one of the founders that will take someone through those LPs, just so that it is really coming from the top and that they feel that they're getting that clear message. Another thing we try to do is just build as much kind of social capital and connection as possible. Again, this may change with scale, but when we do hire a new employee, we try our best within that first month, 30 days, to have some kind of in-person meeting or contact if possible. And that doesn't have to be their manager or myself, or even an executive, but someone who's nearby from the team, that makes it easy to get to them. We just want to make sure that they, feel that camaraderie and start to build those relationships within the company.
Yeah, those are good. I love the phrase expertise is a verb.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talk a lot about being a learning organization, but that's essentially what you're talking about. I love that. Yeah. Okay. So, one of the big concerns CEOs have talked to us about is the concern about mental health of individuals on their team. And I know recently Forbes reported that 69% of people people asked in this particular study said that their managers had a significant impact on their mental health. So that's a big chunk, when it's just as much as their intimate partner, kind of influence that they have. One of the big concerns that CEOs have talked to us about is the concern about mental health of the individuals on their teams. Has this been a concern at Rain? Have you done anything that really addresses this well, that works well for you?
This is certainly an important topic at Rain. We've witnessed some of the impacts of these mental health factors firsthand. During COVID, our CTO took his life,
So
and that
sorry.
was certainly one of the most devastating things that's happened to the team that I've encountered in my career. And the mental health and social factors and unique dynamics that COVID created really played a role in that. It had a profound impact on our team. I think everyone was already feeling the effects of being on Zoom all day, and what a lot of people felt, these blurred lines between work-life balance. And this was just really triggering. And frankly, it wasn't clear at the time, because all of us were just kind of trying to figure out how to get through that time and keep the company moving. But now, now that we're out of it, I've had so many members of our team sharing with me, with others, how depressed they felt during that time, and how there's still lingering impacts of that. And I personally feel that as well. So I was pregnant with our third child during COVID, and suffered from some pretty severe depression during my pregnancy. We could probably talk another 45 minutes on that topic alone. But, I was very isolated. There was not a lot of information at the time on what was, what was safe and what wasn't during pregnancy. So I was more or less kind of, oops, and there's my little one in the background. So,
Love it.
but, there was a lot of just confusion as to the effects of COVID on pregnancy. So what ended up happening is I just stayed inside, and we were in New York City at the time. So I was in my apartment and kind of just walking from the bedroom, three steps to a desk, and then going back to the bed. It was just,
Oh
like
man.
Groundhog Day. And it felt, and then there came a point where, I couldn't even get out of bed. And unfortunately, the combination of Zoom and being pregnant kind of enabled these behaviors where I was going off video, and that was okay. And then I would just kind of, take a call from bed sometimes. And then that turned into me not getting out of bed. And it was just, I felt like it was kind of a scene out of one of those movies. I never understood why every movie that showed someone who was depressed or down about like you see the kind of blinds going up and down and not being able to tell the difference between night and day. I mean, it was just, I was like living that. And, I'm very lucky to have had a husband and support system and family who, helped me get out of that. It wasn't easy, but, I think that there's no other way to say it than it's a huge problem, right? Like, I think so many people are still feeling those impacts today. Maybe in some ways, COVID, one silver lining is that it's become so much more of a conversation today. So there is, more awareness of it. People talk about it more openly, and hopefully there's more support out there for people who need it. At Rain, what we're doing to combat it, it's very hard, but it's just kind of one, acknowledging it, being really open to the fact that it exists, sharing stories like these, and not hiding them. We try to, even though we're a remote company, make those human connections wherever possible. We have in the past had mental health days where we've given the team a day off, midweek on a Wednesday to just go to the gym and focus on themselves. Of course, this is tricky to do all the time because we're a growing company with growth expectations. But at the very least, we're really just conscious to have that human connection, to prioritize small talk during meetings, not to just jump into an agenda, and really just check in on how everyone is doing. Human connection, building that social capital, it's just so important. And I think that's kind of the first real step to starting to fight the mental health issue.
I'm just, I guess, struck by how glad I am that people like you, like let's just say you, are in a role where you can empathize, you can be genuine, you can be smart, you can be strategic, you can be, it sounds like, be yourself and be human, and yet still lead a company in a really powerful way, and in a very important, future oriented tech space. And so I guess I just want to say thank you for being a voice of influence today for our listeners. And I want to say, what last piece of advice do you have for anybody that would want to be have a voice of influence?
I think the authenticity is what really matters. Just having that, it's hard, right? I kind of, there are a lot of things in my life that, including the postpartum depression. Had that happened with my first, I probably never would have talked about it because I was in a different, place in my life, in my career. But I've learned that it's so helpful in connecting with people, connecting with your team, to just talk about it, be authentic, show some vulnerability. I mentioned, at Rain, we are really transparent with our leadership team. If something is keeping us up and worrying us, we try to just talk about it so that we can solve it together. And I think if you're thinking about how to influence, the best way to do that is to be yourself, be authentic, share what's working, but also what's not working.
Thank you so much for sharing today. And is there anything that you want to tell the audience about Rain, or how to get in touch with you, or I don't know, follow you on Twitter, or whatever you want to throw out there?
Of course. So you can check us out, Rain Technology, and also our product, Ortho, which is heyortho.com, is our automotive product that I talked about today. I hope you do.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was good to see you.